I can't feel my legs. The dust is so thick I'm breathing mud. And somewhere in this hellscape of twisted metal and burning diesel, I can hear Martinez calling for his mother. He's 22 years old. In 6 hours, he'll be dead, and I'll be the one who has to write the letter his mother will read through tears. But right now, in this exact moment, with my face pressed against Afghan dirt that tastes like copper and cordite, I don't know that yet. I don't know that by noon I'll be the only one left. I don't know that 9 of my brothers, not biological brothers, but the men who knew my secrets, who shared my MREs, who promised we'd all make it home, will be gone before the sun reaches its highest point. The thing about survival is that it comes with a price tag nobody tells you about. They train you to shoot. They train you to march. They train you to follow orders. But nobody trains you for the silence that comes after everyone stops screaming. Nobody trains you for the weight of dog tags that don't belong to you, pressed against your chest like accusations. My name is David Cooper. I'm 35 years old now, and I've spent the last 13 years trying to find the words for what happened in the Korengal Valley on August 14, 2009. I've started this story 100 times, in therapy sessions where the counselor's eyes got too soft, in bars where the whiskey made me brave enough to open my mouth before stealing my words, in the middle of the night when my wife asked why I was crying in my sleep. But I could never finish it, because finishing it meant admitting the truth. I survived because I broke protocol. I survived because I disobeyed a direct order. I survived because I made a choice that saved my life and couldn't save theirs. And for 13 years, that choice has lived in my throat like a stone. The military gave me a medal. My brothers gave me their last breaths. And I've never known which debt weighs more. This is the story I couldn't tell until now. This is the morning that killed 9 men and left 1 ghost walking around in a body that forgot how to feel alive. This is what it's like to be the one who made it home. If my story resonates with you, please hit the like button to bring a little light to this father's heart. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my upcoming life stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from and what time it is there right now. It makes me so happy to know what corner of the country or world you're listening from. You need to understand something about infantry life in Afghanistan. We weren't just a platoon. We were a family bound by something stronger than blood. We were bound by the certainty that any moment could be our last, and the only thing standing between us and death was the man next to us. I was 22 when I deployed, a kid from rural Pennsylvania who'd never been further than Pittsburgh before the army. Showed me how big and terrible the world could be. They assigned me to 2nd Platoon, Bravo Company, 1st Battalion, 26th Infantry Regiment. The Korengal Valley, where we operated, had already earned its nickname the Valley of Death. It was 6 miles of hell carved into the Hindu Kush Mountains, a place where the Taliban knew every rock, every shadow, every killing angle. We were the outsiders. They were ghosts who'd been fighting in those mountains for generations. The odds were never in our favor, but I had 9 brothers who made me believe we could beat those odds. Rodriguez, who could quote every line from Scarface. Johnson, who kept a photo of his daughter in his helmet. O'Brien, who made terrible jokes right up until the moment everything went wrong. This is the story of the morning I lost them all. This is the story of the choice I made. This is the story I've been too ashamed to tell. Until now. I grew up in a town called Meadville, Pennsylvania, where the biggest excitement was Friday night football and the annual county fair. My father worked at the steel mill until it closed. My mother cleaned houses. I was the first person in my family to finish high school, but college was a fantasy for people with money we didn't have. So 3 days after graduation, I walked into the Army recruitment office on Market Street and signed my name on a line that would change everything. Basic training at Fort Benning turned me from a soft, small-town kid into something harder. Infantry school taught me how to kill efficiently, but it was Afghanistan that taught me what death really looked like when it came for people you loved. I arrived in the Korengal Valley in March 2009. The base was called Fire Base Phoenix, a collection of plywood buildings and HESCO barriers perched on a mountainside like a target begging to be hit. The Taliban attacked us every single day. Some days it was just a few potshots from the ridgeline. Other days it was coordinated assaults with RPGs and machine gun fire that lasted for hours. We lived in a state of permanent fear wrapped in dark humor and cigarette smoke. That's where I met them, my 9 brothers. There was Staff Sergeant James Martinez, our squad leader, 28 years old from El Paso, Texas. He'd done 2 tours in Iraq and volunteered for Afghanistan because he said he couldn't sit at home while his men went to war. He called us his boys, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. Specialist Ryan Johnson from Detroit, 23, our medic, who joined the Army to pay for medical school and discovered he was better at saving lives under fire than he ever would have been in a hospital. Private First Class. Michael O'Brien from South Boston, 20 years old, whose thick accent got thicker when he was scared, which was most of the time, but he never let fear stop him from doing his job. Corporal David Washington from Atlanta, 24, our best shot, who could hit a target at 800 meters with iron sights and who sang gospel songs in his sleep. Specialist Marcus Chen from San Francisco, 22, our radio operator, who carried 40 pounds of communication equipment and never complained once, who wrote poetry in a journal he thought nobody knew about. Private First Class Anthony Garcia from Phoenix, 19, the baby of our squad, who we all protected like he was our little brother, who'd lied about his age to enlist because he wanted to serve. Sergeant First Class Thomas Kowalski from Chicago, 32, our platoon sergeant, a career soldier who'd seen everything and somehow still believed in the mission, who treated us like sons. Specialist James Mitchell from rural Kentucky, 25, quiet and deadly, who could move through the mountains like smoke, who once said he felt more at home in Afghanistan than he ever had in America. And Corporal Samuel Hayes from Houston, 26, our machine gunner, the position I would inherit, who laughed louder than anyone I'd ever met, who died trying to save the others. We became brothers through shared misery, through 100-degree days in full gear, through nights so cold we slept in pairs for warmth, through firefights where we learned the sound of each other's breathing, the rhythm of each other's movements, the unspoken language that kept us alive. We knew each other's stories. We knew each other's fears. We carried photos of each other's families in our wallets just in case someone needed to know that their son, their husband, their father was loved in those final moments. The mission brief came down on August 13th. We were to patrol through the Southern Valley at first light, establish observation points along the ridgeline, and monitor Taliban movement in the area. It was what we called a presence patrol. Basically, show the flag, remind the enemy we were still here, try not to get killed, standard stuff, routine, which should have been my first warning because in the Korengal Valley, nothing was ever routine. I remember lying in my bunk that night, staring at the plywood ceiling, listening to O'Brien snoring 3 feet away. I remember thinking about home, about the girl I'd dated in high school, who'd married someone else while I was at basic training, about my mother's voice on our last phone call trying to sound brave, failing, about the deer hunting trips my father used to take me on, how the Pennsylvania woods felt safe compared to these mountains that wanted to kill us. I remember Martinez sitting on the edge of his cot, writing a letter by flashlight. I never found out who it was for. I never got to ask. We rolled out at 05:30, 9 of us crammed into 2 Humvees, loaded for bear with ammunition, water, and the kind of nervous energy that comes before every patrol. The valley was beautiful in the early morning light, if you could forget that beauty was trying to kill you. Steep mountains covered in pine trees, a river cutting through the bottom, villages clinging to the slopes like barnacles. It looked like a postcard from hell. The Taliban had been quiet for 3 days, which made everyone jumpy. Quiet meant they were planning something. Quiet meant they were watching, waiting, choosing their moment. I was manning the M240B machine gun in the lead Humvee, scanning the ridgelines, my hands sweating inside my gloves despite the cool morning air. Martinez was in the passenger seat, O'Brien was driving, and Johnson was behind me with the medical kit. In the second Humvee were Washington, Chen, Garcia, Kowalski, Mitchell, and Hayes. We made it 2 miles into the valley before the world exploded. The first IED hit the lead Humvee, our Humvee, dead center under the chassis. The blast lifted us 4 feet into the air and slammed us back down sideways. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. My head hit something hard and the world went white, then red, then a sick spinning grey. I could smell burning oil and something worse, something organic and wrong. My ears were ringing so loud I couldn't hear anything else. I tried to move, and my body wouldn't respond. I tried to breathe, and my lungs felt like they were full of sand. Through the cracked windshield, I could see figures moving on the ridgeline. Taliban fighters, dozens of them, maybe more. They'd been waiting for us. This wasn't a random attack. This was an ambush. This was planned. This was a killing box, and we'd driven right into it. The second IED hit 30 seconds later. The trail Humvee. I heard it, more than saw it. A deep concussive boom that I felt in my chest, even through the ringing in my ears. Then the small arms fire started. AK-47s, PKM machine guns, RPGs. The Taliban were firing from 3 sides, from positions they'd prepared, from high ground we couldn't reach. We were trapped in the low ground, in disabled vehicles, taking fire from enemies we couldn't see. It was every soldier's nightmare. It was how you died in Afghanistan. I don't remember getting out of the Humvee. My body moved on training, on instinct, on something deeper than thought. I pulled myself through the door, hit the ground, crawled to cover behind the engine block. Bullets were snapping through the air, hitting dirt, hitting metal, hitting things I didn't want to think about. I could see Martinez 10 feet away, blood covering his face, trying to get his rifle up. O'Brien wasn't moving. Johnson was screaming something I couldn't hear. The trail Humvee was on fire, actual flames, and through the smoke and dust, I could see bodies on the ground. That's when I made the choice that saved my life, the choice I've replayed 10,000 times in my mind, wondering if I was a coward or a survivor, or something in between. Standard protocol in an ambush is to return fire from your position, establish fire superiority, wait for backup. That's what we were trained to do. That's what Martinez was trying to order us to do, though I couldn't hear his words, just see his mouth moving, see him pointing up the ridge. But I knew with absolute certainty that if we stayed in that killing box, we would all die. Every single one of us. The Taliban had the high ground. They had prepared positions. They had more ammunition than we could ever suppress. We were already down, already hurt, already losing. So I ran. I grabbed the M240B, all 27 pounds of it, grabbed my ammunition belt, and I ran uphill. Not down the valley toward safety. Not toward the firebase where backup might come from. I ran directly at the enemy position. I ran at the ridge where the Taliban were firing from. Every manual says, you don't do this. Every tactical doctrine says you don't charge uphill at a prepared enemy position. Every survival instinct says you don't run toward the people trying to kill you. But I did it anyway, because some deep animal part of my brain understood something the manuals didn't. Surprise is a weapon. Audacity is a weapon. Doing the impossible is sometimes the only possible thing to do. I ran and I fired. I ran and I screamed. I ran and I became something other than David Cooper from Meadville, Pennsylvania. I became a moving target they didn't expect. I became a distraction. I became the thing their carefully laid ambush hadn't planned for. Bullets were hitting the ground around me. I felt one tug at my sleeve. Another hit my backplate hard enough to knock me forward 2 steps, but I didn't fall. I kept moving. I kept firing. The M240B can fire 750 rounds per minute. I wasn't aiming. I was suppressing. I was making them put their heads down. I was buying seconds that might turn into minutes that might turn into survival. I made it to a rock outcropping 40 meters up the slope. I threw myself behind it, set up the machine gun, and opened fire on the Taliban positions I could now see from their flank. I was above the killing box now. I could see the whole battlefield. I could see both Humvees burning. I could see Martinez trying to drag O'Brien to cover. I could see the second vehicle completely engulfed in flames. I could see bodies that weren't moving. I could see what we'd driven into. It was a perfect ambush, a textbook kill zone, and I was now the only one in position to break it. I fired in controlled bursts, 3 to 5 seconds, traverse left, 3 to 5 seconds, traverse right, just like they taught me. But this wasn't training. This wasn't Fort Benning. This was real bullets hitting real people and real consequences for every decision. I could see Taliban fighters scrambling, trying to reposition to deal with this new threat from their flank. I disrupted their plan. I'd become the variable they hadn't accounted for. But I was also alone. One man with one machine gun against dozens of enemy fighters, and my brothers were dying in the valley below. Martinez saw what I was doing. Through the smoke and chaos, he understood. He started moving the others, the ones who could move, toward my position. Not down the valley, not towards safety, uphill, toward me, toward the enemy. The absolutely insane thing I'd just done, he was now asking the others to do. We were going to assault uphill into a prepared enemy position. We were going to do the thing you never do. Because there was no other choice. Because staying in the kill zone meant certain death. Because sometimes the craziest option is the only option. I saw Johnson moving, half carrying Martinez, who I now realized was hit worse than I'd thought. I saw Washington running in a low crouch, his rifle up, laying down fire. I saw Chen struggling with the radio, trying to call for help, trying to get air support, trying to get someone to understand what was happening. But I didn't see Garcia. I didn't see Kowalski. I didn't see Mitchell. I didn't see Hayes. The trail Humvee was burning too hot, too bright. Nobody was coming out of it. Time became strange. Combat does that. Seconds stretch into hours. Hours compress into heartbeats. I know I went through 3 full belts of ammunition. I know I killed at least 6 Taliban fighters that I could see. I know my hands were bleeding from the hot barrel. I know I was screaming, but I couldn't hear my own voice. I know that at some point I realized I was crying and I couldn't stop. The others made it to my position. Martinez, Johnson, Washington, Chen. 4 of them. Plus me. 5 out of 9. But the math was still wrong. Where were the others? I already knew, part of me knew. The part that had seen the trail Humvee burning. The part that had seen bodies that weren't moving. The part that was already counting the names of my brothers who weren't here. "Where's Kowalski?" I screamed at Martinez. His face was gray. Blood was running down his neck. "Where's Garcia? Where's Hayes?" Martinez looked at me and I saw the answer in his eyes before he spoke. "Gone," he said. Just that one word. Gone, not dead, not KIA, not casualties, gone. Like they'd never existed. Like they'd been erased from the world in fire and metal and violence so sudden it didn't even feel real. "Mitchell?" I asked, already knowing. "Gone," Martinez said. "All of them. The whole vehicle. 5 men. 5 of my brothers. Dead in the first seconds of the ambush, killed before they could even fight back, killed by an IED that had been buried in that road maybe days ago, maybe weeks ago, waiting patiently like a predator for the right moment to strike. The Taliban had placed it perfectly. They'd known we would come, they'd known we'd use that route, they'd known everything except that I would break protocol. They'd known everything except that I would do the impossible. An F-15 came screaming overhead 30 minutes after Chen got through on the radio. Then another. Then Apache helicopters, their chain guns tearing into the mountainside, their rockets turning Taliban positions into smoke and debris. The enemy broke and ran. They disappeared back into the mountains like they always did, like ghosts who would reappear tomorrow or next week or next month. We held that position for another hour, waiting for the quick reaction force to reach us, bleeding and crying and trying to process what had just happened. I remember Washington sitting next to me, staring at nothing. I remember Johnson trying to treat Martinez's wounds with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I remember Chen talking into the radio, his voice mechanical, reporting casualties, requesting medevac, saying numbers that felt impossible. 5 KIA, 4 wounded, 1 vehicle destroyed, 1 infantry squad effectively eliminated. The quick reaction force arrived with more Humvees, more soldiers, medics, stretchers. They started the process of recovery. That's the military term for it. Recovery. Like we were recovering lost property instead of gathering pieces of men who'd had families, dreams, futures. I walked back down to the trail Humvee with the recovery team. I wish I hadn't. I wish that was one choice I could take back. The vehicle was a charred skeleton. The IED had been massive. Probably 2 or 3 artillery shells wired together, buried deep, triggered remotely by a Taliban fighter who'd been watching through binoculars, waiting for the perfect moment. The blast had been so powerful that the engine block had been thrown 20 feet. I'm not going to describe what we found inside. Some images never leave. Some things I saw that morning will be with me until the day I die, playing on repeat behind my eyelids every time I close my eyes. We found Kowalski's body 30 feet from the vehicle. The blast had thrown him clear. He'd died instantly. At least there was that. He hadn't suffered. At least I could tell his wife that. Garcia was still in the vehicle. He was 19 years old. His mother had sent him a care package the week before with homemade cookies and a letter saying how proud she was. The package was still sitting in his bunk at Firebase Phoenix, unopened. Mitchell was next to Garcia, the man who moved like smoke, the man who felt more at home in Afghanistan than America. He'd finally found his home. It just wasn't the one we'd imagined. Hayes was there too. My predecessor on the M240B, the man whose position I'd inherited that morning. If the vehicle order had been different, if Martinez had assigned positions differently, if luck had fallen another way, I would have been in that vehicle. I would have died in that explosion. Hayes would have been in the lead Humvee. Hayes would have survived. The randomness of it was worse than the violence. The meaninglessness was worse than the death. But there was a ninth body. We counted 4 in and around the vehicle. Kowalski, Garcia, Mitchell, Hayes. 4. Not 5. Someone was missing. Someone was still out there. The recovery team spread out, searching the area, checking behind rocks, checking the blast radius, and that's when they found him. O'Brien, Michael O'Brien from South Boston, the kid with the thick accent who made terrible jokes. He'd been in the lead Humvee with me. I'd seen him not moving after the IED hit. I'd assumed he was just unconscious. I'd assumed Johnson would treat him. I'd assumed he was okay. But when the Taliban opened fire, when the valley became hell, O'Brien had done what I'd done. He'd run. Not uphill like me, not toward the enemy. He'd run toward the trail Humvee. He'd run toward his brothers. He'd tried to get them out. He'd tried to save them. And a Taliban bullet had caught him in the back 20 feet from the burning vehicle. He'd died trying to be a hero. He'd died trying to do the impossible. He'd died because he was too brave and too good and too young to understand that some people can't be saved. We loaded 9 bodies onto a Chinook helicopter that afternoon, 9 flag-draped transfers cases, 9 sets of dog tags, 9 names that would be read at a memorial service 3 days later, 9 families that would receive folded flags, and the thanks of a grateful nation and a hole in their lives that would never be filled. Martinez died on the medevac flight to Bagram. His wounds were too severe, the damage too extensive, the golden hour too long past. He'd held on long enough to see his boys to safety. He'd held on long enough to complete the mission. Then he let go. He was 28 years old. He'd written a letter the night before that I never got to read. I hope it said everything he needed to say. I hope his boys back in El Paso know how much he loved them. So 9 became 10. 10 bodies. 10 brothers. 10 men who woke up that morning thinking about breakfast, about the patrol, about getting home someday. 10 men who never made it to noon, and 1 man, me, who broke protocol, disobeyed doctrine, did the impossible, and lived. The army investigated. They do that after catastrophic losses. They interviewed me for 6 hours, recording every detail, trying to understand what happened, trying to extract lessons that might save lives in future ambushes. They asked me why I ran uphill. I told them the truth. I don't know. Instinct, panic, luck, divine intervention, the desperate calculation of a terrified 22-year-old who didn't want to die. They asked me if I thought my actions saved lives. I told them I thought my actions were the only reason anyone survived. They asked me if I would do it again. I told them I hope I never have to find out. They gave me a Silver Star for valor. There was a ceremony at Bagram Airfield. A general I'd never met pinned a medal to my chest and shook my hand and said words about courage and sacrifice and duty. I stood at attention and said, "Thank you, sir," and felt nothing. The medal felt like an accusation. Every time I look at it, I see 10 faces. Every time someone thanks me for my service, I hear their voices. Martinez calling me one of his boys. Johnson singing off-key in the shower. O'Brien's terrible Boston accent. Washington's gospel songs. Chen's quiet poetry. Garcia's infectious laugh. Kowalski's fatherly advice. Mitchell's comfortable silence. Hayes's thunderous laugh. All of them gone, all of them dust and memory and flag-draped coffins flying home to families who would never be whole again. I finished my deployment. I did the remaining 4 months because that's what you do. You keep going. You keep doing your job. You keep breathing even when you don't want to. The Army offered me a promotion. They offered me a transfer to a training unit where I could teach tactics, could share my experience, could help prepare the next generation. I declined. I took my discharge papers on the earliest possible date and flew home to Pennsylvania with a duffel bag and nightmares that would last the rest of my life. I didn't go to the funerals. I couldn't. 10 funerals in 10 different states. 10 families looking at me and wondering why their son, their husband, their father didn't come home. But I did. 10 graveyards where my name would be cursed or blessed or simply remembered as the man who survived. I couldn't face them. I wrote letters instead. 10 letters that took me 6 months to finish. 10 attempts to explain the unexplainable. 10 tries to put into words why their loved one was a hero, was necessary, was mourned. Some families wrote back, some didn't. I understand both responses. The PTSD diagnosis came 2 years later. By then I was living in a studio apartment in Pittsburgh, working construction, drinking too much, sleeping too little, and slowly disappearing into a fog of survivor's guilt and self-medication. My mother found me one night, passed out on my floor, an empty bottle of whiskey next to me, and a loaded pistol in my hand that I didn't remember taking out. She called the VA. They called the police. I spent 72 hours in psychiatric hold and then 6 months in intensive therapy. The therapist was a Vietnam veteran named Dr. Morrison, who'd seen his own horrors in his own jungle war. He understood things other people couldn't. He understood that the problem wasn't that I'd survived. The problem was that I'd survived by breaking the rules. The problem was that my disobedience had saved 4 lives but couldn't save 10. The problem was that I'd been right and wrong simultaneously, and I didn't know which weighed more. Dr. Morrison asked me once if I blamed myself for the deaths. I told him I blamed myself for living. He asked me what I thought my brothers would want. I told him I didn't know. He asked me to think about it, so I did. I thought about Martinez, who called us his boys, who loved us like family, who volunteered for deployment after deployment because he couldn't stand being safe while his men were in danger. What would Martinez want? He'd want me to live. He'd want me to thrive. He'd want me to honor their sacrifice by refusing to waste the life they'd helped me keep. I thought about O'Brien, who died running toward the fire, who died trying to save his brothers even when saving them was impossible. What would O'Brien want? He'd want me to be brave. Not brave like charging machine gun fire, brave like telling this story, brave like facing the truth, brave like choosing to keep living, even when living hurts. I got married 3 years ago. Her name is Sarah. She's a teacher. She's patient in ways I don't deserve. She knows my story. I told her everything on our 4th date because I couldn't build a relationship on lies and silence. I expected her to run. She stayed. We have a daughter now. Her name is Martina. I named her after Martinez. Sarah understood why without me having to explain. Martina is 2 years old. She has her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness. She'll never meet the man whose name she carries. But I tell her stories. Age-appropriate stories. Stories about a brave soldier who loved his boys. Stories about sacrifice and duty and the terrible cost of freedom. Someday, when she's older, I'll tell her the whole truth. I'll tell her about the morning I lost 10 brothers. I'll tell her about the choice I made. I'll tell her why she has the name she has. The nightmares never completely stopped. I still wake up sometimes, gasping, reaching for a rifle that isn't there, listening for explosions that happened 13 years ago. But they're less frequent now, once a week instead of every night. And when I wake up, Sarah's there. Martina is sleeping in the next room. I have a life. I have a future. I have reasons to keep going that have nothing to do with survival and everything to do with living. I go to therapy once a month. I attend a veterans support group every Tuesday. I talk to other men who understand what it's like to come home when not everyone made it back. We share stories, we share silence, we share the impossible weight of being the ones who survived. I visited the memorial at Arlington last year. The platoon erected a marker, not official, just something we did ourselves. 10 names carved in stone. 10 dates that ended on August 14th, 2009. 10 lives that mattered. I stood there for an hour, reading their names, remembering their faces, trying to find words that felt adequate. I couldn't. There are no adequate words. So I just stood there, a 35-year-old man crying in front of a piece of stone, and I told them I was sorry. Sorry I survived. Sorry I couldn't save them. Sorry it took me 13 years to tell this story. Sorry I didn't go to their funerals. Sorry I'm still here and they're not. Sorry for all of it. But I also told them thank you. Thank you for the brotherhood that gave meaning to the meaningless. Thank you for the example of courage, even in the face of impossible odds. Thank you for dying while trying to save each other instead of dying alone. Thank you for giving me a reason to keep trying, keep fighting, keep living. Thank you for the gift of life. Even though it came wrapped in guilt and grief, I told them about Sarah, about Martina, about the construction company I started that employs 5 other veterans, about the life I've built from the ashes of that morning. I told them I'm trying to make it mean something. I'm trying to be worthy of the chance they gave me, even if they didn't know they were giving it. Looking back now, I understand something, Doctor. Morrison told me years ago that I couldn't accept at the time. He said there's a difference between surviving and living. Surviving is what I did for the first 5 years after Afghanistan, existing, breathing, taking up space, but not really being present. Living is what I'm trying to do now, building something, loving someone, creating meaning from tragedy. My brothers didn't die so I could survive. They died in a war that might not have needed to be fought, in an ambush that might have been prevented, on a mission that might have been unnecessary. Their deaths didn't have inherent meaning. War rarely does. But their lives had meaning. The brotherhood we shared had meaning. The way they faced death had meaning. And if I can take that meaning and turn it into something, a daughter who knows her name honors a hero, a construction company that helps veterans find purpose, a story that finally gets told, then maybe, just maybe, their sacrifice wasn't completely in vain. The truth is, I don't know if I was right to run uphill that morning. I don't know if what I did was brave or stupid or some combination of both. I don't know if there was any choice I could have made that would have saved them all. But I know this. I tried. In that moment, with bullets flying and brothers dying and the world ending around me, I did the only thing I could think of to change the outcome. It wasn't enough. It saved 4 lives, including mine, but it couldn't save 10. And I've learned to live with that. Not happily, not easily, but live with it, because the alternative, giving up, giving in, wasting the chance they gave me, would be the real betrayal, would be the real dishonor to their memory. If there's a lesson in all this, it's not a clean one. It's not heroic or inspirational or the kind of thing they put on motivational posters. The lesson is that war is chaos, survival is random. The difference between living and dying can come down to split-second decisions that you don't even consciously make. The lesson is that you can do everything right and still lose everything. You can be brave and still fail. You can survive and still feel like you died. But you keep going anyway. You keep trying anyway. You keep living anyway. Not because it's easy, not because it feels good, but because 10 men didn't get that choice, and dishonoring their sacrifice by wasting your life would be the greatest sin of all. That's what I've learned. That's what it cost to learn it. That's the story I couldn't tell until now. This is for Martinez, Johnson, O'Brien, Washington, Chen, Garcia, Kowalski, Mitchell, Hayes, and the part of me that died with them in the Korengal Valley on August 14th, 2009. You're not forgotten. You never will be. I carry you all with me, every day, in every choice I make. Rest easy, brothers. I've got the watch from here.